to welcome our next guest who's come down from the Midlands.
Yeah, from Derby.
From Derby, great. Really pleased to welcome Sai Chu from Digit Music. He's going to be demonstrating the composer and talking a little bit about the company. So I'll hand over to Sai.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Andre's a bit of a tough act to follow, so bear with me. But yeah, nice one. Thanks for having us down, guys. So yeah, I'm here from Digit Music. Our tagline is music made easier, which makes some people skin crawl a little bit. I'll be honest. You know what we're talking about there. Really, it's not making music easier. It's really about lowering barriers to access for people, whether that's from a physical, cognitive point of view, or whether it's just from, you know, instruments can be complicated. You know, there's a lot of work needed to put in to get to the point where you can really get that kind of enjoyment and feedback back from it. The work that we're doing is to try to kind of lower that barrier for people and enable more people to be able to access music in the way that they'd like to do so. Next slide, please, Rob. Thank you. We've got this. So yeah, just our company, Digit Music. Essentially, we're three things. So we're a record label. Kind of for the uninitiated, we're a record label. Actually, we're a sample content label, really. So we work with various different producers and studios around the world to create sounds. We create music technology, so here for the camera there and for people there, this is Composer, which I'll introduce you to shortly. And this is a joystick with 8 soft pads, and we've got a RAM mount on the bottom here. It resembles a wheelchair joystick for those that have seen or felt one of those. It gets called many things, weird and wonderful, TV remotes, Daleks, got called a U-boat the other day. So yeah, I didn't quite realise how retro it looked when we made it, but the world tells you what they want once it's out there. I've just realised I've not done an audio description, so apologies. So I'm nearly 40, white guy with a greying beard, a baseball cap on, and a black T-shirt. And yeah, I've come all the way down from the Midlands here to see you all today. So these are the kind of 3 elements of the company, and I guess I just wanted to, on the next slide, just give you a little bit of like kind of how we ended up here, really, like what was the journey, and I'll fly through this so we can get on some sound. But I've always been a producer and performer, and going out and playing live. Doing live electronics, it was always the thing that interested me. So when I did my first album, that was what I wanted to do, was go out and play it live with musicians. And then that just got me into working with various different acts and working with orchestras, etc. And throughout that time, everything that I was trying to do was kind of to make my setup as organic as possible. I think there can be a bit of a stigma with electronic music. You know, you turn up with a box and people expect everything to kind of, you know, you've got to play to a certain time, certain key, you know, and when you're working orchestras, etc., that can kind of, they sometimes turn their nose up at that. Something that I'd like to change, but you know, that was just the way it was. So I wanted to kind of make something that was really quite organic. That being teamed up with never been that high up the bill. You know, it's not like I had a big rider and like loads of tech team or anything. So it's about how do I get as many things, you know, the things that I can fit in my backpack, how can I get the most out of those musically and organically as possible. Through doing that work, I then started working with some young disabled musicians. I'd never done it before, but they were all working with iPads, and kind of I was brought in to try and sort of bring a sort of center point to that, to kind of to sort of bring some of the sounds together and kind of support them with their production. That project is called the Able Orchestra now, and we've performed at quite a few places, played at the BBC proms and things like that, played with various different orchestras and worked with loads of different musicians up and down, some of the guys you know, Chris Halpin and people like that. And kind of through doing that work, just recognised that a lot of the instruments that are out there, obviously I'm preaching to the converted here, you know, a lot of the instruments that are out there aren't necessarily fit for everybody's needs, you know, so it was like, how do we take the sort of what I've built up over the years as a performer to create something that can hopefully facilitate more people being able to access music. So I went off and got an Arts Council grant to build the first one. The reason the picture's up there is because now on their sort of picture on the Arts Council login is now somebody using Composer, which is quite a nice thing to see. Then that teamed up with my business partner, Owen Wilson, who some of you guys I think know as well. He was working at Native Instruments for years. And sort of seeing similar things, you know, like this general kind of, there can be complication, there can be barriers that don't need to be there, essentially, you know, whether that's from a technical point of view or, you know, a few kind of steps that can be reduced to get people making music quicker. So that's kind of where we've led to. And then that's a little outline of Composer on the end there. So here is Composer. So I've got one here. I've got a few of them actually. There's one plugged in over there for you guys to have a play with in a little while. And I've got one here. Essentially, as I mentioned, it works as a joystick with 8 buttons. We just had somebody do a review on it, and they said it's the weirdest thing they've ever been sent. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's what they said. They really liked it, which is good. Essentially, how it works is each of the directions on the joystick plays a musical note. So yeah, it should be plugged in there. So can everybody hear that all right? It's all good out front. Okay, great. So I've just got it plugged into like a Rode sound on Ableton. Great to hear you giving so many props to Ableton earlier, Andre, as well. They're doing a really good job with the accessibility side of things. And Note's amazing. For anybody who's not used it, it's brilliant. You can swing beats really nicely in there and sample things in really quickly as well. It's great. But yeah, so I'm just using Ableton here just to set up a few sounds. So here I've got a Rode sound. Each of the directions that I play is going to play a different note, and it auto tunes into C major. So you've got each of the notes there. We've then got octaves so that we can move up and down the scale. So we can go down to C1, or watch your ears, everyone, up to C6. Oh, that was a lot less dangerous than I thought it could have been. No need for the warning, I don't think. And the way that we ship Composer is kind of with this light mode. So one of the things that we wanted to do was on don't worry about the slides now, but on one of the next ones, we've got a notation system that sits alongside Composer called Arrow Notes. Because we've got a directionally based instrument, it means that we can start to use kind of gaming lexicon, up, down, left, right, etc., for musical notation, but we can also then use colors and arrows. So what we've developed is a notation system that kind of starts there, almost looks like a dance mat or something like that, you know, with bright colored arrows. And we're also working on a kind of an accessible version of that as well. Not strictly Braille music, but something kind of akin to that will hopefully help for visually impaired players. And that then takes you through your kind of modes. One of the things that was important for us was really about, like, if people get a solid music education and are able to access things and aren't, you know, shoved in a corner with a tambourine, as we've heard, like, you know, umpteen times, or just getting something that's not engaging for them, that isn't relevant to what they're listening to and what's going on outside, you just see the drop-offs for people taking music, which then means, you know, down the line, you've got less producers, you've got less performers, you've got less music. It just makes the world a bit more dull, doesn't it? So we thought we need to, let's start kind of at the source, if you like. So the way that we've designed Composer is so that it's, we think, as simple as possible to get connected. It auto loads into C major, and then you've got a notation system that aligns with all of the other instruments that are used in, you know, in a special educational needs classroom, for instance, where you've got boom whackers and things like this. Composer's able to bring a whole new level of sound to that space, but still using the same notation. You're not asking teachers to learn a whole new lexicon or learn something completely new. But then the notation moves up to kind of traditional notation, essentially, to remove that glass ceiling. So what we're finding is schools and colleges, universities and places like this are starting to use Composer because it's able to get their kind of students to sound better quicker than they could previously. You know, we talk a lot about Midi here. Everybody's, I'd imagine, using Midi in some way, shape or form, but any kind of music production that's done, you know, Abbey Road, wherever you're going, Midi's needed. You know, it's the de facto way to input things. And even somebody who's a, you know, grade 8 guitarist who might have all of the chops on the guitar, actually, unless you've got something really nice to be able to do that, you still need some kind of keys skills to be able to get Midi information into a computer. So again, that's kind of what we wanted to do with Composer, is make sure that you can effectively get Midi into a computer or into your sound source or your synth, whatever it might be, so that you can perform. So we're kind of going around the houses a little bit here. But what we've got is going back to the pads here. This is kind of, yeah, there we go. That's where I was. I was on the focus feature set. So we've got kind of a few modes with Composer, but this is the really focus one. So when you load it up, it's called instrument mode. You know, this isn't a piece of tech that we're expecting to do absolutely everything in your studio. This is really about a new way of engaging with an instrument or actually creating sound. So we've got the octave buttons that are able to give you your kind of range, moving up and down. We've also got at the top here of the 8 pads, we've got 2 mappable CCs, which we can use to trigger whatever we want. I think I've got a couple of things set up in Ableton for them at the minute. But then when we move down, you've got sustain. And the way that that's set up is if you're using single notes, it will hang the notes. So it means you can start to build chords up using that. So using the kind of combination of the octaves and then the sustain, you can start to build up nice chords. You know, so you can start to build things up quite nicely, and the notes will all sort of hang over in the single note mode. Then the next pad along, this turns on chord mode. So what this does, it means that each movement of the joystick will play the chord that is relative to the direction that you've chosen. Everything in it is kind of diatonically mapped as well, so it's all going to kind of stick in scale and in key. There's ways of getting out of that, which I can show you as well. But what that means is, again, by using the sustain and with chord mode, we're going to be able to play chords. And the notes don't hang over, so when you're in chord mode, the kind of sustain comes on and off. So it's kind of that singer-songwriter accompaniment thing, so that people are able to play and perform, but without having to, you know, be really hot on turning sustain on and off. And then when you get down to pads 5 and 6 down here, this is kind of the bit we like, because this kind of adds a little bit of flavour to your chords. So here we're just playing. So if I'm over there, I'm playing an A minor triad. If I press this pad here, it's going to add the 7th at the top. And then here, it's the 9th, but it's like folded underneath. And then that's 11th or 4th. Andre, you're probably you're far better equipped at music theory than I. So, yeah. So, but essentially what we're doing is we're kind of adding a bit more flavour to each of the chords. And then once you're over to the next pad over here, you're talking about inversions. So it's just changing the voicing of the chords. So, you know, I'll just give a quick example. So if we do the A minor, you've got the A at the bottom, and then with the first inversion, puts the C at the bottom, and the second inversion has got the E at the bottom. So the reason that kind of becomes important, I guess, one, for shaping your sounds when you're performing, but also it's we use these in an ensemble setting a lot. So for instance, we'll go in and work with 5 to 10 young people or 5 to 10 students somewhere or other, and we'll all be creating music, but everybody can set their voicings and get themselves to where they need to be really quickly. So the other thing that's on here as well, in fact, if I just go over to this one here. Yep. There we go. Sorry, it's a flute. I was too low. So what we've got on here as well is quite a lot of expression. So you've got the movement out from the center, but you've got quite a lot of dynamic on there as well. So it means that rather than just playing a kind of note on and off and just with the velocity, you've got the velocity, but then you've also got the sort of ability to do that, that kind of expressive bit over the top. You know, so depending on what sounds you're using and what stuff you're modeling, you can do quite a lot with that. So we've got some things in Ableton in here that we can show you. So this is the light version. So this is kind of how Composer ships. I'll quickly show you how to get it out of the diatonic as well. So if I play, in fact, let me go back to another sound that I can actually play chords with. There we go. So over here I've got like a A minor, but if we press both of the octave buttons at the bottom here, it's going to flatten whatever you do next, everything by a semitone. The idea being that obviously the world's not diatonic, you don't just sit in a scale all the time. So we wanted people to be able to play chromatically and come out of that if they wanted to. So I can't exactly remember exactly what got programmed on here, but let's just play a couple of sounds along with things. Okay, yeah, so here we've got a couple of things programmed. So I'm just controlling a filter over here. which I'm just able to bring on and off, and then able to move down through the Ableton session. We've got obviously various different bits set up inside here. Yeah. And what we've done essentially is remove any of the notes that aren't going to work in the scale. So it just really opens up people's ability to just be able to go in and perform and play and compose, you know, without having to necessarily understand each of the elements that are happening. It's just focusing on the creative side of it. So that's the kind of the light version, if you like. But the one that we've got here that we haven't shipped yet is the Pro version. So the units are the same, but it's just the firmware that's on here. And what we've done on this one here is added a few additional pages. So rather than having the blue buttons the blue pads at the top as MIDI CCs, toggling things on and off, we can actually just go to another bank, and we've got a bank of 6 toggle CCs. So we're able to turn those on and off and trigger anything that we want, essentially. So we can map some things in Ableton. I'm not connected to the screen, so I won't go through and show you. I'm sure most of you know how to map things in Ableton as well. But we've got a lot of options there with the 6 pads. On the next page here as well, we've got incremental kind of CCs, so you can go up and down dependent on, you know, and the longer that you hold them, the faster that it will fly up, so you can be really direct. This is great for adding reverbs and delays and things like that. And then on this page, this is where for me it kind of gets to the fun bit. So this, sorry, I keep turning away from the mic. So this one here is kind of really for a live setting, really. And what we've got is we've got other MIDI notes. So these aren't MIDI mappable. Sorry, these aren't velocity sensitive at the moment. They're just capacitive touch. But these actually come out on a different MIDI channel to the joystick. So it means if I was attached to something, I'm not going to be able to play this very well, but I'll do my best. So. So you've got access to 2 instruments essentially at any one time. So by having both of those set up, you can actually do quite a lot of a live performance just with, you know, with one unit on your own. But generally, what we find is we try to get as many people, you know, people playing these together. So it'll just attach over Bluetooth. There's no noticeable latency. Obviously, there is latency, but there's no noticeable latency in it. We've been really pleased with that. So if you're using Mac or iOS, then we definitely recommend going with the Bluetooth, unless you're on stage, because quite often I still prefer a cable on stage. But if you're on any other setup, Windows, Chromebook, or whatever it might be, then you've got a USB-C at the front here, so that you can go into the front. And I guess one sort of point of differentiation with this is we took the plunge to commercially release the product. Which I'm quite happy to talk at length about the trials and tribulations of that over a very stiff drink. But yeah, you know, it was for one thing that we'd sort of found going in, and we'd use loads of great instruments and things that we'd adapted, but we wanted people to have something that they were able to take away with them and to sort of take into their home. It's not an easy task, and it's one that we're still sort of fighting through. But they are available and they are out. There's some with Drake Music as well, I believe, and there's a few other ones around for people if they want to have a go. But that's Digit Music and that's Composer. Yeah, any questions from anybody, please?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Si. Okay, I think first question over to Andre.
Yes.
Yeah, my question was, with the flute, was it using Aftertouch? Because it sounded really cool. I'm guessing it was Aftertouch of some sort.
Nice one. Yeah, well, so it's the SWAM audio modeling plugins, and you can essentially map the expression to whatever we want. So it's kind of the equivalent to Aftertouch, yeah. Because the note on happens at the sort of center point of the joystick movement, but then you've got the sort of movement from the center out to the end, which sends another CC. So we use that to map to expression.
I love those products. I have them as well.
They're awesome. Nice. They're really good. Yeah, they're really, really good. The brass particularly sounds more like brass than any other plugin that I've ever heard, because generally they don't sound anything like brass.
No.
It's worth noting as well on that, I've sort of talked about the CC, the expression side of it, which is one CC across all. So you've got CC 102 is what we use, which is the same across every single direction, meaning that you can use it for expression, but there's loads of different CC settings in here. So you can have it so every direction does a different CC, which we'll sometimes use in a live performance for triggering visuals or something like that, or kind of plugging in with a lighting rig. There's another one as well, which is kind of a nested XY. So you've got 4 CCs that sort of overlap as an XY pad, which again in a performance is really good for, I don't know, catching beat repeats or sending off the delays and changing the timing of the delays and things.
Amazing. Another question at the back here. Sorry, I'm going to have to bring it forward.
Hey, yeah, something that I thought was pretty cool, which I might want you to explore or just speak a bit more about, is that you said many people were playing it at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and you were talking about orchestras as well. Was that using that instrument or was that something else?
Yeah, no, so it's using this instrument, yeah. So performing with traditional orchestras. So, you know, for instance, a show that we did a little while ago now, actually, you had the violin section, and then inside the violin section, you had 2 people using Composer. One was playing violin sounds alongside, following a similar score, and another one was kind of using effects and kind of adding delays and things to the violins. So really, how we kind of want Composer to be seen, or where we'd kind of designed it to be, was it's an instrument and it fits in where other instruments fit, you know. So quite often we'll plug this into an iPad and have a mini rig, and then you've kind of got a movable, you know, a movable sound that you can take around and you can kind of sit within an ensemble.
Yeah, I really like the idea of just being able to play with other people. And let's say you're playing violin, it's like, I want to play the flute today. You just know the instrument, you don't need to relearn it. So yeah, it's cool. You can all swap places within that orchestra. Yeah, I just like the idea how it can just bring people together and play with each other.
Nice one, thank you.
Great. Any more questions? Oh.
Hello.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about your tactile score. You said it over as it kind of becomes more, as you progress through it, that it develops into stave notation.
Yes.
Does the tactile score, is there a way to progress from the tactile score into Braille music?
That's the plan, yeah. So the tactile score is very, very, very early days yet, you know, but that's where we wanted to go with it. Again, because the essentially we've got 8 notes to play with, you know, and then you've got octaves, and there's accidentals and things in there, but the number of kind of notes needed to represent a full stave, as it were, is hugely reduced. So we're hoping that we can kind of get something that's really working. But there's one thing I didn't mention is there's quite a lot of haptic feedback in Composer as well, specifically because you've got pads that you've got to press and they're turning things on and turning things off. And for the visually impaired musicians that we work with, you know, it's no use unless you understand where you are with that. So we did a first pass at it and got it completely wrong. You know, so even the advice was, they wanted to, the guys we're working with were looking at kind of having some feedback on the joystick itself, kind of musical tactile feedback, if you like, and it just didn't work. It really got in the way of things. So we then stripped right back, and we're now working with people to kind of build it back up.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Thanks.
Just a quick question.
Right, sure.
How does the Composer work with triggering visuals exactly?
Yeah, so I mean, so depending what program you're using. So in this instance, we're using something called Resolume. Yeah, great. So Resolume, every single scene in Resolume can have a MIDI trigger sent to it. So you can use any of the directions on Composer, or you could use any of the kind of pads on the Pro version. The way that we've always kind of done it is having a laptop that's playing the sounds, as it were, and then we've got another laptop somewhere that's doing the visuals, and then we just send the information over a network. Yeah. So we'll either have them linked, or we'll just have a sort of output on here and set up a MIDI network to go. But Ableton Link's great for that as well. No problem.
Any questions in the chat at all? No. Yeah, no, interesting you mentioned Ableton Link. We've been talking about doing some link jams as well at some point, and maybe we can invite you along to do something with the Composer as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'd love to.
Great.
Right. Yes, please do.
Let's get all the technology together.
Yeah.
And believe you brought down one to demo over there.
Yeah,
as
there's one
well?
there, and I can plug these ones in as well. So if people want to have a little jam with them in a bit, please help yourselves.
Great. Any more questions? Oh, sorry.
Just a quick one, just about what was the flute? What did you use? What program was that?
Yeah, so it's the company's called SWAM. Yeah, so it's SWAM Audio Modeling. And they've got really good iOS apps now as well. So we use the iOS ones. I've got them over there, so you can have a little play in a bit. But they're really good. They rely on expression. So when you're using them with a traditional keyboard, you've kind of got to have one hand on the expression as well, or potentially aftertouch, like Andre was suggesting. But yeah, we find it works really well for the kind of more traditional sounds. It's a way of kind of getting them feeling quite real.
Is there MPE kind of built into the functionality of Composer?
There is on the way, yeah. I mean, MPE is not, I guess, yes, there will be elements of it, but MPE really comes into its own when you're triggering multiple things with multiple fingers, because then you've got, individual movement of every kind of element, because obviously we've got the joystick, we're doing one thing at one time. So if we're doing this, it's only going to be triggering that one note, but we're looking at different ways that we can bring it in and get more out of it.
Any more questions? No? Oh, thank you very much again, Si.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.